This is Nasha Kasha, a Ukrainian almanac. 28 minutes of stories for everyone about Ukrainian life. Nasha Kasha is heard on 19 campus and community radio stations from Newfoundland to British Columbia. I'm your reporter, Stefan Andrusiak. This is episode 271. It's August of 2021. Here's a story we brought you this time last year. When I was a boy, my room was next to the kitchen at the back of our two-bedroom home. We lived in that part of Montreal called Rosemont. My window looked out onto a large plum tree. It was just beyond an upwardly inclined tin roof. Many a morning I would wake up to the sound of splack, splack, splack. It was the sound of bending tin under cats' paws. I considered this my early warning system. If a cat could be that loud walking across that tin roof, I was confident that no scoundrel would ever be able to skulk across that tin roof and threaten me in my room. I still remember that day I brought my cat Smokey home in the hollow of my windbreaker. I carried it like a little baby kangaroo. It was all my friend Bogdan's big idea. You see, Terry Witwicky's cat had just delivered a brood of kittens. Terry was desperate to give them away. Bogdan's mother didn't want any kitten, that was for sure, but he thought I would be a pretty good caregiver. You see, I had a history with cats. When I was but a toddler, I swung a cat by its tail onto my back. Believe me also when I say that I did this only once. The deep scratches that I earned promoted a even deeper sense of respect for all felines from then on. That story became something of a legend, and my mother would recall it often, along with the time that, out of her sight, my curious little self had pulled a large pot of hot borscht down upon me from her stove. I had kept these two memories of maternal lapses at the ready just in case, but on that day I didn't have to guilt my mother in order to keep the kitten. At first she refused, but when I argued that I was in fact saving it from a heartless disposal, she relented, all the while cautioning me that Bogdan and I had probably pulled the kitten away from its mother far too early, and that he would never amount to much. He survived, and we cared for Smokey, but we didn't pamper him. He was welcome inside our home. He was well fed, much loved, but we'd put him out at night to roam the alley and beyond. I've always been struck by the expression, cat on a hot tin roof. It's from the Tennessee Williams play by the same name. I don't recall any neighborhood cat of ours being dumb enough to traverse a hot tin roof. Their footfalls were a thing for the cool of early morning. I still remember waking up to the sound of splack, splack, splack. It was the beat that announced that morning had broken and that Smokey was back. Welcome to this episode of Nasha Kasha. It's dedicated to music and stories about cats. And here singing about her cat is Оля Almashi.
У маленькій, у хатині, на тепленькій кожушині, хтось тримає, хтось макаче, позранку спадки хоче. Ось вечір, цілу нічку, не зікнула вона вічки, зашукала хитру мишку, натрудилась вона трішки. Тут проходить, день минає, кіт за хвостиком махає, і нас чекає нічку, щоб піймати сіру мишку. У маленькій, у хатині, на тепленькій кожушині, хтось тримає, хтось порхоче, спозранку спадки хоче. Кіц, 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 кіця, кіця, кіцуня, мур, 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 мурка, мурка манюня, кіц, 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 кіця, кіця, кіцуня, мур, 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 мурка манюня, meow.
My name is Anne Smutyuk, and I live in Toronto, Ontario. But I did live in Edmonton, Alberta for about 31 years, and this is where our cat story happened. Our daughter Natalka was in about grade 12, and we had a screened-in back porch at the back of the house, And one day she came to us and said, I hear a cat meowing. I hear a little kitten meowing. So we went outside and we looked and we couldn't see anything. Went back in. The next day, same story. She says, I hear a little kitten meowing outside. Went outside and again couldn't find anything. Third day, this was a Sunday night now. It's about 11:30 at night. Andrei, my husband, is in bed. Natalka comes in and she says, I hear a kitten meowing. You have to get dressed and come outside and help me look for the kitten. We all went outside. Andrei and Natalka climbed under the back porch, and sure enough, there was a little pipe there. They saw a little kitten inside, but they couldn't get the kitten to come out. They tried putting milk and food. Nothing would entice the kitten to come out. Actually, the kitten ran further into the pipe. So we followed that pipe, and it actually went down into our basement, into our furnace room. We ended up closing the door to the mechanical room in the basement to try and catch the kitten, which was hiding under the hot water tank. We finally managed to catch this little kitten, and when I saw him, he fit into the palm of my hand. And I saw this poor, tiny, helpless little kitten, and I just burst into tears because I was convinced that he'd been without any food or anything for 3 days and that he was going to die. So we ended up packing him up into the car, and we took off to the emergency vet clinic, where they checked him out and said he was okay, just a little dehydrated. And we asked what was going to happen to him. They said, well, he'll be put up for adoption. At which point, my husband, who's not a cat lover, turned and said, well, maybe we should adopt him. And now, 17 years later, Caesar is still with us. He's old, but he's here.
Volodymyr Kish lives in Oshawa, Ontario. He says, to tell you the truth, cats and I have been waging a long-standing war. Volodymyr claims his tale is long and tragic.
Народився і жив перші 12 років свого життя в маленькому місту Руан-Норанда.
I spent my first 12 years in the northern Quebec city of Rouyn-Noranda.
Ми жили на краю міста коло ліса.
We lived on the edge of town where I saw no cats.
Мій перший правдивий контакт з котами було, коли моя родина переселилася до
I had my first contact with cats only once my family moved to Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario.
На фермі було немало котів, але вони були досить дикі.
There, on the farm, there were many cats, all of them feral.
Жили на дворі, полювали на
They lived outside, hunted in the fields, and they hid in our barn.
2 рази на день.
Twice a day when we would milk our cows, they would visit.
Вони завжди тоді прибігали, бо знали, що моя мама їм почастує трохи
My
свіжого
mother
молока.
would give them some
То було
milk.
тільки тоді, що я
It was
довідався,
then
що
they
я
discovered
мав сильну алергію до котів.
A severe
Хвилину-дві
allergy to
коло них,
cats.
і мої очі почали свербіти, мій ніс наповнився
Every time
смаком.
they arrived, my eyes would itch, my nose would run, and I would sneeze until they left.
Я почав тримати далеку відстань від усіх котів.
From that time on, I tried to stay away from them as far as possible.
Причіплятися до мене чим більше. Я певний, що вони якось знали, що я маю алергію до них.
The further away I went, the closer they'd come. It's as though they knew I had allergies to them and they wanted to make me miserable.
Навіть сьогодні, коли
Even today, when I'm invited as a guest, and in that house there lives a cat, he recognizes me immediately
просто на мене нападає.
and leaves me alone not for a single minute. Walter even wonders if this is not some kind of punishment from
Божова
God.
кара чи нещастя.
I just know that between cats and me there will be neither peace nor rest.
Я знаю, що між котами і я ніколи не буде ні мир, ні спокій.
Забувай про все, що тобі болить, будуть гарні твіт. Хай на вулиці твої музика звучить тисячами струн. Хай прийде весна у твій ясний дім, коли ти одна, коли ти сумна, крила одягай, дали ти собі. Лети, лети над небом, поки крила є. Не бійся впасти, поки любов в серці є. Нехай туман і дощі тобі не друг. Лети, мій друг.
Volodymyr Kish recommended that I play some Jazz for Cat music. Jazz for Cat is an 8-piece Ukrainian band which formed in 2016. Vocalist, guitar, clarinet, string quartet, percussion, and saxophone. Volodymyr Kish himself is a columnist. His articles appear weekly in the Ukrainian publication Новий шлях, New Pathway.
Ти не плач, не плач, вже твій день прийде, буде все як ти вінок сплити, та у танець ти в тисячі доріг. Хай живе в очах твоїх, не згасає хай, коли ти сумна, крила одягай, дали ти собі. Лети, лети над небом, поки крила є. Не бійся впасти, поки любов в серці є. На-на-на, нехай туман і дощі тобі не друг. Лети, мій друг.
Nasha Kasha comes to you from CHRW 94.9 FM on the campus of Western University in London, Ontario, Canada. We're heard on CHMR 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland, on local 107.3 FM in St. John, New Brunswick, on CJAS Radio 93.5 FM in Saint Augustine, Quebec, on CJLO 1690 AM in Montreal, on CFRC 101.9 FM in Kingston, on CFMU 93.3 FM in Hamilton, on CKMS 102.7 FM in Kitchener-Waterloo, on CJAM 99.1 FM in Windsor and Detroit, on CKLU 96.7 FM in Sudbury, on CILU 102.7 FM in Thunder Bay, on 101.5 UMFM in Winnipeg, on CJTR 91.3 FM in Regina, on CFMQ 98.1 FM in Hudson Bay, Saskatchewan, on CFBX 92.5 FM in Kamloops, on CIVL 101.7 FM in Abbotsford, on CJSF 90.1 FM in Vancouver, and on CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo, British Columbia.
Hi, this is Vera Coral, and I live in Mississauga, Ontario. This is a true story about our beloved cat, Schmeezel. One summer, we decided to go on a road trip with Schmeezel from Edmonton to Vancouver via Quesnel and Barkerville. I wanted to visit some historic gold towns and try some gold panning. Initially, Schmeezel growled. It was a non-stop guttural howling. But eventually, he settled down and mostly snoozed in the back window. And so we continued on our adventure. When we finally arrived in Barkerville, there was a torrential downpour. We got stuck in a sea of mud. So much for gold panning. Poor Schmeezel started howling again as we rocked the car to push it out of the mud. Thank God a Good Samaritan stopped and pulled us out. We continued on our way to Vancouver and the next day decided to have lunch in Stanley Park. We found a beautiful spot to spend a couple of hours. Well, if my husband Oleg didn't absent-mindedly let the cat out, Schmeezel had bolted. We didn't panic at first, thinking he would respond to our voices and come out. So we picnicked. Then we searched. We spent the next 7 hours pleading with Schmeezel to come out from wherever he was hiding. It was pitch black outside when we decided we just had to leave. I was tearfully resigned to losing Schmeezel forever. As we got back into the car, put on the lights, and started the engine, who should miraculously appear out of nowhere but Schmeezel? He just strolled right up to the car. He knew that we were going crazy looking for him, but he waited to the last possible second before getting back into that car. I was so relieved and happy that I couldn't be angry with him. Needless to say, that was the last long road trip with Schmeezel.
Коли розвіється туман, ти знов розтанеш і подзвониш. Я покладу собі в карман від твого серця срібний ключ.
Коли розвіється туман, я скажу всім своїм знайомим, до тебе ніби не жила, тільки не мовчу на мене.
Киця, очі чорниця, губи сумниця.
Ти знов попав.
Киця, зранку до ночі, хоче любиться. Ну скажи, коли настане новий день, ми будем пити разом каву, сміятись голосом дітей, пісні писати про любов.
Коли настане новий день, я посміхнусь тобі ласкаво, попрошу зорі познімать мені з небес руками знов.
Киця, очі чорниця, губи сумниця.
Ти знов попав.
Киця, зранку до ночі, хоче любиться. Ну скажи.
Ola Tsibulska wrote music and lyrics to the song called Kitsia, which is an endearing way to say cat in Ukrainian. Now, Ola is joined here by Dzidzio, a band with a comedic bent. It's based in Lviv, Ukraine. This cut is from a music video also called Kitsia. It's about lovers making up after a quarrel while their cat looks on, unimpressed.
Я так давно тебе чекав, і ти до мене прилетіла, не відпущу тебе, my love.
Моє тіло для твого тіла.
Киця, очі чорниця, губи суниця.
Ти знов попав.
Киця, зранку до ночі, хоче любиться, ну скажи. Киця, 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 я знов попав. Киця, зранку до ночі, хоче любиться, ну скажи.
Добрый день, good morning, bonjour. This is Zenon Levitsky, aka Two Goal Levitsky, with my Huff and Puff Hockey Club from St. Thomas, Ontario. This is a story about my cat, Toby. He was a beautiful male cat and very affectionate. And one day, my wife is looking out the kitchen window and she says, Toby's doing a lot of meowing and he's walking funny and he's rubbing his butt on the grass. And I go, oh boy. So we go out to examine, and this cat somehow has a rubber band sticking out his butt that he is trying to pass, and to no avail. He's just meowing and meowing. So my wife Sheila says, we got to take him to the vet. I said, whoa, this is going to cost money. Let me see if Dr. Zenko can do something here. So I go into my tool shed, and I find a pair of old rubber garden gloves. So I'm sneaking up on him, behind him kind of quietly, and he got suspicious, so he kind of took a few steps away, and then I stopped, and I pretended I was doing something else. And then when he was distracted, I started crawling again. I snuck up on him, and I got a hold of that rubber band with my rubber gloves. Well, I started pulling it, and he just got the shock of his life when I did that. And he took off running. I'm holding on to this rubber band, and I think I got a lot of it coming out, but it slipped because my gloves, the rubber band was wet, and my gloves were wet, and whack, right on his butt. He took off. Anyhow, about an hour later, he comes back, like nothing happened, like, what's for dinner? What's going on? And in the meantime, I had to listen to my wife chastising me for being too cheap to take him to the vets. So, yeah, that's my one episode of being a veterinarian here. And, he lived a good, long life. So that's my funny story for my cat, Toby.
Here's a story about a Montreal-based cat, as told by my friend Oksana Shtik.
My Tonkinese cat, Max. My daughter got this cat when the cat was really, really small, tiny, from her godmother. I think he was the runt of the litter, and he had these big ears. He looked like a little prairie dog or a little baby fox with these big ears. this little cat had a tiny little tail. Either it froze off or it was bitten off. We have no idea. And the little cat was so adorable, we named him Max. He would hop with me to the bathroom where I would brush my teeth, wash my face, and kept the water going all the time from the faucet. And he was my little pal. When he grew up, he was quite cuddly. Whenever we sat and watched television, he started on my lap, and then he hopped over to my husband's tummy, and he just loved taking the shape of my husband's tummy, and it was quite enjoyable. We remember one time when he just zoomed out of the house. It just so happened that the door was open and he just ran out. We couldn't find our Max at all. The whole night he stayed out, and then in the morning, right where the patio doors are, we saw him and his escort dripping wet. He was such a poor cat. We were very happy to see him open the door, and only he walked in, and he never did that again.
Throughout this episode, you heard Ukrainian songs about cats and kittens. The Ukrainian word for cat is kit. Just think of it. Kit, cat, kit cat, kit for cat. Also try to remember that the affectionate term for kit is kitya. In 1992, I was asked to MC at the Garden State Arts Center in Homedale, New Jersey. The Ukrainian band Fata Morgana was the headlining act. The lead singer for that Ukrainian rock group also had a solo segment that weekend. With cats on my brain, I introduced him wrongly as Alexei Kirikitsya. Worse still, I didn't notice until someone near and dear to him, who also happened to be the lady who hired me, pulled me aside and said, slowly and with purpose, Kirikisha, Stefan, Alexei Kirikisha. Here, with Lullaby for a Grandson, his own composition, is Alexei Kirikisha. I dedicate it to the coolest of cats in my own family, my grandson, Jacob.
Sleep tight. Хай приснятся тобі веселі дні, щасливі дні.
Nasha Kasha is also a podcast. There's an easy way to access it for free. Go to nashakasha.libsyn.com. Nasha Kasha is one word. Libsyn is spelled Libsyn.com. nashakasha.libsyn.com. New Pathway Ukrainian News delivers news and insight every week in English and Ukrainian. Subscribe today at newpathway.ca. Partial funding for Nasha Kasha is provided by the Shevchenko Foundation and by the Ukrainian Credit Union. I'm your reporter Stefan Andrusiak. Back in a week, God willing. До милої зустрічі. За тиждень часу, дорогі слухачі.